Thank you for joining. My name is Heather Kutzman, and I'm the Gemvision Technical Support and Training Director. And today we are going to talk about quite a few topics related to CounterSketch. So let's go ahead and get started. On today's webinar, we've got quite a few Pinterest to price examples, and this month we're actually going to focus a little bit on pendants. So CounterSketch is definitely a tool that can be used for rings, and a lot of times it's associated with bridal jewelry, but we can also use CounterSketch to create pendants. And so I wanted to do a couple of freehand pendants this month. There's some really great trends that are happening in kind of what I think of as high fashion jewelry, and I wanted to see if we could work on translating those into CounterSketch. And then we also have a brief discussion on our quick estimate tools. We did an update to CounterSketch back in July, and we basically just kind of reformatted our quick estimate tool to make it a little bit more user-friendly and easier to read. But I wanted to just briefly talk about some of the tools associated with that. And finally, we're going to take a look at the newest library designs that have been added to the CounterSketch library. Just to go over those, make sure you're aware of them. We've got some great, very trending styles that are being picked by our merchandising team that I hope you will find relevant for your customer base. So let's start out again with Pinterest to price. This is going to be our necklace edition of Pinterest to price for September. And this first one is just really a metal fashion piece. I thought it was really interesting. They call it a diamond necklace, and it took me a minute to figure it out, but with a slight hint, I finally got it. And so you can see this piece is literally a piece of metal that's been extruded that looks like the shape of a diamond. So it's kind of ironic, but also kind of fun and trendy. I see a lot of metal fashion, especially in stackable necklaces. I think that's a trend that's been happening for a while now. And so I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes doing this really simple piece because I think it has some other applications as well. So this will be pretty straightforward, but I'm sure many of you will be able to think of other ways that you could design things along this same line that might be helpful. So we are going to build this piece entirely out of freehand parts. There isn't anything in the CounterSketch library that looks exactly like this. So I'm going to hop over into CounterSketch, and we're going to start with freehand. So left click on our freehand tile. And then within our freehand tile, you'll see we've got all these different categories, and the one that we're going to look at today is shapes. So I'm just going to left click on shapes, and these are all different shaped pieces of metal. So it's pretty straightforward, lots of different shapes to choose from. And you can see here that I've got one diamond shape that's more flat, and then this other that's more domed or kind of has a pillow look to it. And I think for the piece that we're working on, we really want to use this more flat diamond shape. So I'm going to select this style and then left click on Start Designing to open up this style and bring it out onto my screen. I'm going to bring out my grid. So if you come up here in the upper right corner, that third option says Show Hide Grid Lines. I'm going to show them just because I want to get an idea of how this piece is going to look. And without that grid, I don't really have kind of what I think of as a ground plane or something that I can work from. So I'm going to bring out that grid, and I'm going to start out by just scaling this diamond shape down. And when I'm using my three-dimensional scale handle, it doesn't tell me exactly what size this piece is, but if I hover over these other kind of scaling disc that I have, I can start to get an idea of the dimensions. So this is about 4.5 by 6 millimeters. And I think that that's a decent size for this pendant. Again, that's going to be something that you can discuss with your customer to kind of make sure that you're not only staying in the right size, but also the right budget. So we're going to scale it down to about that size. And then I'm going to rotate this so that it's standing up. So right now it's kind of laying flat on my surface. I'm going to left click on this rotation handle, And as I do that, I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard, and that's going to allow me to rotate this piece at 45-degree increments so that it's standing up. So we can kind of start to see this piece taking shape. So we've got that diamond shape, we've got it about the right dimensions as far as the outside dimensions, but it needs to be a lot longer to really make a true pendant or necklace. So we're going to come in here and choose this green scaling disc, which is going to allow us to scale this piece in a single direction. And in this case, we're just going to make it a lot longer. So I'm just going to left click and drag this out. And as I'm dragging, you can see in that little pink box in the center the dimension of the length of this stone, or of this stone, sort of a stone, of this shape. So it's right now about almost right at 10 millimeters. And again, this is where you want to get out a millimeter gauge, kind of show your customer what that dimension is so that they can understand kind of the size of the finished piece and what it would look like. And if it needs to be longer or shorter, then again, you can always come back in here, left click on this scaling disc and extend it or shorten it. All right, so I'm going to go to about 16.5 millimeters. We're going to go make this one a little bit larger. And you can see now we have the shape of that metal diamond piece. It's also all over here on the left side of my ground plane. That's fine. This is really just aesthetics, but because I have that grid out there, I kind of want to center it up. I'm not going to be super accurate because again, it's really up to me, but I'm going to slide it back over so that it's more in the center of my ground plane. So now we've got our diamond shape and we've extended it or extruded it out to make it longer. And now I need to go back and add the O-rings that will allow me to join this metal pendant to the necklace. So we've got the start. Let's go back to our freehand parts menu, and we're going to left click on wire, rope, and knots, because under this wire, rope, and knot category we have this piece, which is really just an O-ring. So I'm going to select it and left click on start designing. So it comes out on our screen. I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my diamond shape. I'm going to left click and drag the rotation handle while holding Shift on my keyboard to get it into the right orientation. It's also way too big, so we're going to come in here and look at our design stack on the left side and select our inside width and left click and drag that to the left. So we're going to make it a lot narrower, which gives us an unusual shape, and then we'll do the same thing with our length. Left click and drag it to the left. So now we've got this kind of donut shaped or torus created, and we're going to come in and left click on our width and bring that down as well. So I'm going to go to about 1 1/4. Same thing for our profile height, left click and drag that down to about 1 1/4. So now this looks a little bit better. It's still a little heavy in my opinion for a ring. So if we want, we can again left click and adjust that profile width. We'll bring it down to 1. Left click and adjust that profile width, bring it down to 1. Now the wire is the right size, but the opening in the center looks too small. So I may increase the inside length and width back up to about 1.5. So that looks more like a ring that I could attach a chain to. And we're just going to place 1 on this end. We kind of want to sink it down into that metal shape so we've got good contact. And then if I want to, I can use my, I think it's going to be top mirror. Yep, I'm going to use my top mirror option for that ring up here and do that. So we've got 1 on both ends. And then if I need to, I can come back in here to my shape and kind of adjust this. This is also a really good reason to have this grid out here, because with this grid we can kind of look to make sure that we've got the same spacing on our ring on both sides of our pendant. So we can kind of check to make sure everything's lined up the way we want it to be. Now this last step in CounterSketch is more of an assembly piece, and it's really just for the aesthetics of overall how the design is going to look with a chain attached. So I can go back into my freehand parts menu, so I'm going to left click here to add a piece. And then from there I can go in and select a chain from my chain menu. So again, we're kind of adding all of these components into our design as we work through. So left click on chain. Again, that chain to me looks kind of like a curb, like a cable chain maybe. So I'm going to pick a heavier cable. And like all of our pieces, it comes out laying flat. So we're going to use our rotation handle. Again, left click on that rotation, hold down shift and rotate it up. And then I also need to reorient this entire chain so that it's following the direction of my pendant. So now I'm going to choose this green rotation handle, hold down shift again, and we can start to rotate that into place. Now, obviously, we can't cut this chain in CounterSketch, so it's going to be one continuous piece, but we can adjust the overall width of the chain and bring it in or out to make it look like it's going into those rings. We can't do the soldering and kind of make everything look perfect, but we can do a little bit of manipulation with this so that that center piece of our chain is kind of hidden, and so that the links of the chain look like they're going into the links of this opening. So a little bit right in here that's not really accurate for our picture, but hopefully this is enough to get your customer to understand what that finished piece may look like. And again, you can use kind of the overall height and the width of this chain to help you get that look and kind of perfect it as much as you want. So I'm going to hide my handles, I'm going to hide my ground plane, and now we can kind of see what that necklace looks like once we've built it out. I think in our original image everything was yellow, so I'm going to update my materials to show the same. This one is another necklace. It also has what I think of as halos. So this one has diamonds instead of being an all metal piece, but it also has this kind of linked chain pattern, which I think is really nice and something kind of creative. Obviously, you can imagine different scenarios. Maybe your customer comes in and says, you know, I really love this, but I would rather these be in the shape of a marquee rather than a round or cushion shape like we have here. And so it's going to be easy to kind of translate this into something else. I think there's also an opportunity to make this into like a mother's pendant where we put one child's birthstone in one halo and one child's in the other. So I think this has a lot of kind of fun application. So let's hop back into CounterSketch, and we're going to go through the process of building that piece. So again, I'm going to go into my freehand parts menu, and I'm just going to grab a couple of halos. So I'm going to go into my settings, and if I want, I can come in here to my design element and select a halo option and then OK, and it will only show me halos that are relevant. Now we have our new French set halo, which is very awesome, and our French set half halo, which I think we discussed on our last webinar. And then if we want, we can choose any of these halos to work with. I'm going to pick this one here because I think it resembles more closely the style of the piece that we were working with. But again, based on your customer's preference, you can just about select any halo that you'd like. From here, we're going to decide what shape. So I mentioned maybe our customer is interested in something more like a marquee shaped halo. And again, we want to make adjustments to the length and width of this piece to make sure that it kind of aligns with our customer's design idea as well as their price point. So I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. So we've got our one halo out here on the screen. And then we need to create another one. If this is a good scale for the piece, then a lot of times I will just come down here to my design pieces, left click, and choose duplicate selected. So again, I'm left clicking on this hamburger menu and I'm choosing the second option, which is duplicate selected. It creates a copy of that piece right on top of itself. So there we go, we can kind of see that second one. And maybe for this one, I'm going to be a little creative here. We're going to use a pear shape. So we're going to do one side being marquee, one side being pear. And for my image, I actually would rather have the points coming together. So I'm going to have to rotate this around. So we're kind of creating something a little bit more unusual than our original image. But again, with CounterSketch, it's pretty easy to select a different shape by just left clicking on these halo shapes up here. Right now we have a problem because our halos are cutting into each other, which looks a little strange. So I'm going to rotate one of these halos so that they're kind of not intersecting with each other, but rather interlocking. So I'm going to give this guy a little bit more space and just rotate this around a little bit until we get to a point where the metals aren't kind of melding together. We want to make sure that it's clear that there's separation between those two pieces. So we've got those two pieces kind of interlocking, working together, but I also can tell if you look at this from the bottom that these are kind of tilted out, which is great if we were using these halos for a ring, but in this case we really want to use these halos to kind of be face out or kind of more forward looking. And so we can come to our design stack over here on the left and select Gem Tilt, which is one of the sliders. And I'm just going to left click and drag this to the left. And as I do that, you can see that my halo has kind of flattened out so that those stones are no longer angled. Again, because I did this after I did my duplicate, I'm going to need to go into my pear-shaped halo and do the exact same thing. So now we can see those gems kind of more aligned in the direction that we want them to go. Now with our piece, kind of differently than before, we are going to see a lot more of that chain on this style than we did in our last one. You'll remember from our kind of inspiration image that there isn't a noticeable ring on these. It looks like the chain is just soldered directly to the piece. I just for fabrication reasons would go ahead and add a ring in here, even if it's just like a half ring or a D ring, it's sometimes called, just because it'll be less visible. So again, we're going to go back into freehand parts, go to wire, rope, and knot, double left click to add out that O-ring, same piece that we used in our last necklace. I think you'll find that this works pretty well for almost all of your pieces. I remember from last time that about a 1.5 opening for my width and length is a good size. So I'm just going to replicate that here. And I'm also remembering that my profile width and height should be about 0. So we're not having to do all that testing because we've used this ring before. And again, this first one is pretty easy. It comes straight out and attaches. And now I'm noticing, okay, look at my halo and look at my ring. My halo is about 1 millimeter, but my ring is about 1 millimeter, but my halo looks really thin. And I'm thinking durability wise, it might be better if these halos were a lot thicker. So I'm going to go back by left clicking on that piece in my parts tray down here at the bottom. And I'm just going to increase my halo profile height. So let's drag this to the right. And now we've got a much thicker halo that's going to be a lot more durable, especially if our customer is going to wear this on a regular basis. We've done it to one halo. Let's again left click on our pear-shaped halo, and we're going to do the same thing. Left click and drag that halo profile height to the right. When we do this, we start to get that overlap again, right? Because we've got larger pieces kind of intersecting with each other. So we might need to add more gap and more of an angle so that these pieces don't intersect. And then again, we'll maybe do a duplicate on this ring because we've got it all correct. And then we'll just drag it over to our other side. And I'll rotate this to kind of align with the angle of this ring. So again, we're just doing really similar steps to what we did in our last piece by adding these rings in. And then we'll do again that same step where we add the chain. Now adding the chain on this one, like I said, is a little bit more precarious because we don't have that gold metal block that we can hide that center section of the chain in. So we've got our chain. I'm just going to rotate it to get it into the right position. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And again, you'll notice with this piece, I did not go to the work of adding out my ground plane or that grid that we were working with. On this one, I'm going to try to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to increase my width, come in here. And so you can kind of see what that's going to look like coming together. Now again, you have to ask your customer to use their imagination because this component here is not going to be there, and we're going to have a lot more kind of natural curvature to this pendant that's in the center. It's going to dangle and kind of hang a lot more loosely than what we're able to accurately depict in a 3D environment. Many of you, because you're in the industry, may have already seen these. These are the new Harry Winston kaleidoscope pendants, and I think they're a really neat statement piece. Obviously, these are very large pieces that have a lot of detail to them, but a lot of times we see that fashion is kind of derivative, and so we may see something like this in Harry Winston, and then our customers may come in asking for something that's maybe a little bit of a smaller cluster, and depending on your market, you may have customers that are interested in something exactly like this. But I saw these and I thought that they were really creative. Obviously, they've got beautiful different types of gemstones in them. And I thought about kind of how this trend might translate into a local market. So based on this, what can we expect our customers to be asking for? And so I wanted to create kind of, again, thinking about a family pendant or a mother's jewelry, or even just, someone who has some loose gemstones. Maybe they sold some gold and they have all these various loose gemstones that they want to combine to create kind of a pendant that they could wear. So I wanted to just play a little bit with this concept, maybe not obviously building out these exact designs, but something along this idea where you've got this mixture of diamonds and gemstones and kind of a large cluster with various shapes and sizes, and then some type of a unique bail happening at the top. These particular pieces are in a circular layout, but again, based on the components that our customer comes in with, we could do, a triangular layout, a square layout, kind of whatever we think would work best based on what they're looking to purchase and what they have to work with. So these are, again, kind of our inspiration pieces, and then we're going to try to translate this idea or this concept of these kind of different shapes of gemstones into something in CounterSketch. So I'm going to hop back over into CounterSketch. I'm going to left click on our freehand components, and then I'm going to left click on settings. So our settings are going to get us started. And anytime I'm building a large cluster, I always like to try to use the same setting throughout. And the reason for that is because it just gives my design a little bit more consistency rather than if I choose, one type of head on this side of the pendant and one type on this side, and then it starts to become less cohesive as an overall design. So I'm going to select kind of my most versatile and my most basic setting for this because I feel like in this design, the shapes and colors of the gems are really what stand out and kind of drive the overall look. So let's grab our center setting. So we're just going to bring this one out. On this pendant, again, I'm going to left click to add my ground plane because to me that just helps to set everything up nicely and give me an idea of how large my pendant is getting. So like I was saying, if we were translating this to more of an everyday look, we can see here that this is 5 and this is 10 millimeters. So a 10 millimeter round pendant would approximately be in this space. If we think about a 15 millimeter pendant, which is maybe a little less everyday, we're going to be at about this size. So each of these little grids or each of the larger squares is 5 millimeters. So that gives me an idea of how far I want to go as far as size and scale to create this design. So I've got kind of some boundaries that I'm setting for myself in the overall design. You'll also notice that this setting, when we initially bring it out, is contoured at the bottom because by default we're assuming that this is going to be set with a ring, and so we need to follow a ring rail. Because we are building a pendant, I'm actually going to come over here to my design stack on the left side and left click on that setting enable pull to rail. So I'm going to kind of deselect that option, and you can see that the bottom of my pendant flattens out, and now I have just a kind of a flat traditional setting, which is more appropriate for a pendant. So here we go. We've got our design started. So again, we can discuss with our customer kind of where they want to start. I'm going to just select an oval for my center stone, and maybe because this is going to be the largest of our stones, we are going to go with something a little bit larger, so maybe like an 8 by 10 instead of an 8 by 6. There we go. So we've got an 8 by 10 oval as our center, and we're going to adjust this maybe to be an amethyst. Alright, so we've got our starting point here. Now from here, again, we're going to kind of talk with our customer in the beginning and decide what we want to work with. But in this case, I'm just going to go back out, and I can either come into my settings and select a setting and kind of start from here, or if it's easier, I can always go into the existing setting I have on my screen and choose that second option, which is duplicate. It's up to you. Obviously, I made that change to kind of flatten the base of my setting, and I'm not going to have to do that again if I copy an existing piece. But at the same time, I'm going to make these side pieces a lot smaller. So maybe I'm going to switch to a marquee shape, and this marquee we're going to say is going to be like 4 by 2. So significantly smaller than our original stone. So up to you if you want to do a duplicate or if you just want to create a brand new piece from the library. So we're going to left click on our rotation handle, and in this case again I'm holding down shift. So I'm going to bring this in here, and we're going to say that this stone, well, we'll change the color later. So we want to kind of look at this. I do like the kind of V-prongs on this. If you don't like the V-prong, you can always come down into your design stack, change that to a traditional prong, or if you do decide to do a traditional prong, maybe choose a different setting style like this that might be a little bit more secure for those pieces. And then I want to just bring this in so that it comes closer to making contact with my center setting. All right. And I'm going to I can do a couple of things here. So we're creating kind of this repeating kind of mandel look for this pendant. So I can either use my top mirror to mirror this, my side mirror to mirror this over to the other side of my piece. Or if it's easier for me because I want one at maybe the top, bottom, and side, I can left click on this blue box and that takes me to my polar array menu. So if I left click on that polar array icon, now it starts to duplicate this design all the way around my center shape. And I think this is going to be more appropriate for what I'm trying to create. So I chose the polar array option. The red handle represents my start position, the blue handle represents my end position, and I'm just going to left click and drag this around until those two come together, and I'm at 360 degrees. This green handle sets my count, so right now I'm at 4, which is actually perfect for what I'm trying to create. Or maybe we want 6 and we're going to go back and add some other things in here. So again, based on your design, you can choose a different concept. I'm just going to pick that one and do it that way. So I'm going to left click on that blue box again, which takes me out of polar array, and now I've got the start of my design. These marquee I'm actually going to maybe take to Savorite garnets. So let's choose our any gem, any color. We're going to left click on these stones to select them, and I know they're selected because they turn red, and I'm just going to pick left click on Savorite garnet and click apply. So now we've got some color differentiation going on, and then I'm going to left click on done. So we've got us started. Now I'm going to work and start duplicating some of this, right? So that looks pretty good, but I'd kind of like to have more of a petal look to this. So I'm going to drag this one out to the side. And because I've duplicated this, it's happening all around my ring. So you can kind of see what I'm going for here. I'm really creating kind of one on the side. So we took that original stone that was polar arrayed, we duplicated it, and now we're just adjusting its position. To make this also fun, we're going to try this. Let's see what happens when we choose opposite. Nope, not good. Okay, let's try quad. That's better. So when we click on quad, we get kind of 2 of these radiating from the center, which is again helpful if we're trying to create kind of a 3-pronged kind of floral pattern here. So we can start to bring those out, and again, because we're just duplicating, everything's going a little bit faster now. So we've got our design started there. We're going to need to go back and select all of these to make them green. So the next thing we're going to do is add maybe one more stone here on the corners. So again, we're trying to kind of translate this trend into something that would be a little bit more everyday. In this case, maybe we're going to choose, I'm going to try something else. Let me go here and change everything to Savorite garnet. And then if I come in here and select my center stone, there we go. There's more than one way to get it done. Okay, so we've got kind of this start, and maybe we want to come in here and add either a tapered baguette or a trillion or a pear or something in here to kind of give it a little bit more and extend this piece a little bit. You'll also notice when I did my polar array, the shape that I used was round. Even though my center stone shape is a oval, the round really gave me the placement that I wanted, but that may not be true for this next set of stones that we're going to work with. So So Joseph did give me that kind of feedback that we could possibly use oval instead of round when we did the polar array. I chose to do round because I wanted to keep those stones really tight and kind of close in. But it doesn't mean, again, that we have to do it that way. You can always change it up and do the way that you feel like is going to be best. So I'm going to again go back in here. Let's grab another setting. I'm going to stick with that same setting type. And this time I'm going to grab it from the library just to show kind of a different way that you can do the same thing. So before we were duplicating, this time I'm adding a stone out onto the screen from the freehand parts library. And we're going to drag it up here kind of into the corner. I'm going to change the shape of it. So instead of being round, maybe we're going to choose something that is pear shape. And for our pear shape, we're just going to rotate that. And it's way too big, so we're going to decrease the size. If you are doing this as kind of a remount piece where you have stones that are specific sizes that you have to use, my recommendation would be to kind of build this in quadrants. So lay out kind of a quarter of the number of stones that you have to work with, and then design kind of a quarter of the piece. So if you have 4 pear shapes and 12 marquee, then give yourself maybe 4 pear shapes or 1 pear shape and 4 marquees, and then your center stone, and kind of start playing with the placement of these in one area, and then you can kind of figure out what that finished piece might look like, because it's easier sometimes than trying to lay all 12 out at once to kind of take a portion of them and create a section of the design and then go back and kind of add all of those additional pieces in later on. So again, based on how you design, you may want to sketch it out first and then build it in CounterSketch second. But those are all ideas of ways that you can build this out if you are limited and you have specific shapes and sizes that you're working with, just to make it easier. So we've got those 4 laid out in here. I'm going to do the same thing again. I used my quad mirror. I positioned one and then used my quad mirror to lay it out on the corners. And all I'm going to do is try this again. We'll go back into any gem, any color, left click to select those stones that we're working with, and maybe these we're going to make rhodolite or raspberry rhodolite garnet. Alright, and then what I may want to do now that I've got my gemstones in place, because in our original piece we definitely had a mixture of diamonds and gemstones, is go through and add in a couple of smaller melee diamonds in between these Savorite garnets to give it a little bit of a contrast. So again, we can choose to either duplicate the stones that we already have out on the screen, and you'll remember, because I did not, that these new pear shapes probably still have enable pull to rail selected. So it's not a huge change. Like as we're looking at it here, I'm going to do that one more time so you guys can see it. I clicked enable pull to rail. That's what it looks like when it is enabled, and this is what it looks like when it's not. So it's just a little shift, but it's a bigger deal on our big center stone. So if you can remember, go ahead and make that change. Alright, so let's go in and grab a diamond. Again, I can duplicate these if I want. If we want, we'll go that way. Duplicate. And we're just going to switch it to a round rather than a pear shape. And we're going to make it a lot smaller so that it'll fit in these openings that we've got. So let's scroll up in our design stack, choose a round, and start moving it over into these openings. And because my quad mirror is still on, I get 4 of these automatically. Now I can come up and turn off that quad mirror if it's distracting while you're working and you don't really want that. That's not a problem. But it does automatically do that for you because you duplicated it. I think this one is still kind of on the big side, so that's a 2mm. I'm going to try 1.5. For that, I will need to type the dimensions in because my slider only goes down to 2. But I like that 1.5. I think it's a good size. And I'm just going to rotate this a little so that it tucks in this space. And with this one, we can do the same thing. So we're going to left click on the blue box till we see that polar array menu, left click on polar array. My start position is here at the red handle. I'm going to left click on the blue handle and drag it all the way around till it meets back up with that red handle. And then we've got to figure out our count. So how many of these do we need to go in all of the openings? And that's 13, but when I do 13, take a look here, we have stuff hiding underneath, right? So that's not really helpful. We need something that's not going to cut underneath our other pieces. To go back, I know that Joseph mentioned like we want to use a different shape. So originally right now my polar array is laying out in a round shape. If we left click here, we can update our shape to be various shapes. So right now this is more of a cushion shape. You can see the outline in this kind of pink or white line on the screen. If I left click again, I can get more of an oval shape. If I left click again, I get more of this emerald cut shape, and you can see them changing down here in the little thumbnail if it's difficult with all the other things that we have on the screen. We even have a heart layout or a marquee layout, but none of these are really getting me the layout that I need. And because I have this unusual pattern that I'm doing, it's always going to put a stone underneath these cornerstones, which is not helpful. So even though it seems like polar array would be the best option for laying this out, in this case it isn't. So to turn off polar array when it doesn't do what we want it to do, we just left click on that polar array icon again. Now it starts duplicating our head around the top of our ring. We'll turn it on again. It starts duplicating around the body of our pendant. And then if we left click again, it turns polar array off. Now, you'll remember when we first started, we had quad mirror turned on. I'm going to turn quad mirror on again, and that works pretty well. But that means that I'm going to have to do a little bit more work to get these other stones into the corners over here. So we're running close on time, but I'm going to do this fairly quickly. So I'm just going to click on that blue box again. I'm going to duplicate these pieces, and then I'm just going to use my arrow keys to drag them over into that opening. So there they are. If I want, I can click on this duplicated set. So there we go. We've got our handles for that duplicate, and now we're just going to drag it over and place it here in the opening. We're going to have to do a little bit of work just to re-angle this piece to get it in the right place so that it lines up with everything on this side. So we may have to do some slight adjustments to get it in position. But overall, we can start to build this out. And then again, just so that we continue to follow our train of thought, we're going to come in here, select all of these round stones that we would like to be diamonds, so left clicking on them, and then we're going to left click on diamond in our any gem, any color, and say apply. And then it should apply diamonds to all of those pieces, and we'll say done. And we start to see this piece kind of take shape based on, again, kind of a little bit of a more everyday version of what we were looking at before. So you can see from the concept how if you wanted to build something out that was a lot larger and contained a lot more stones, we could definitely do that. But in this case, we're kind of looking for that everyday look, which is a little bit more understated than maybe our original inspiration piece. I did not go through the process of building out the bail on this one. It would be very similar to what we did before, where we would just pull some of the gemstones up to create a bail and then add an O-ring to the back of that to be our pendant that would connect to the chain. So really similar concept to what we've already done, just the layout of it all here. So quick render to kind of see how our design is taking shape. As we finish up, I do want to talk about the quick estimate tool just really quickly. And this is the new interface for the quick estimate tool. You can see here that we have kind of drawn more attention to the fact that the prices are estimates and they're based on today's metal market, and this is the time and date that the piece was quoted. So it's really clear to your customer that if they come back at another time, the price may be a little bit different based on that day's metal market. We also have our various metal qualities over here on the left, the overall weight of the piece in penny weights and grams, and then the different melly qualities across the top. So all the information is very much the same. We just kind of laid it out a little bit different. Down here you'll notice that we call special attention to the fact that the large stone is not included, but that the accent stones are included. And just a reminder, the quick estimates are approximations, so they don't reflect gemstone prices. So if we had a gemstone in this ring, it's going to assume that it's a diamond. And then there are if there's additional options added after the order, such as engraving or maybe we're using the customer stones or any kind of fabrication charges. So we were talking earlier, we would have to do an assembly on some of these necklaces. CounterSketch isn't smart enough at this point to know that there's assembly charges. So just keep that in mind, that your price may vary a little bit based on any additional changes beyond kind of setting the stones and the materials that are shown on the screen. In these large gems, so large gem in our definition is anything over 0.3 carats, so not quite a third, but just under a third of a carat, we're not going to include. And again, it assumes that everything in that image is a diamond. So just keep those things in mind when you're working in your quick estimate. While you have your quick estimate pulled up, you can click on this little settings gear here on the screen, and it will take you to see all of the different metal qualities and all of the different diamond qualities that are available. If there are metals that you would prefer not to offer, you need to left click on these checkboxes, and that will deselect those metals. And so the next time you pull up a quick estimate, these metals that are not checked will not show up. And the same is true for your diamond options across the top. So these are definitely can be controlled by you. If you don't want to sell anything in silver or maybe with I1 quality goods, you can uncheck those boxes and that will not appear as a price option for your customer. The next thing you'll see here is to include a screenshot with the print. So you do have the option to print a quick estimate for your customer if you'd like, and we will include a screenshot with the print if that's something that you'd like for us to do. So that's just another place where you can select that option for your quick estimate. So these are our new models. These were added to the library in September. They are sorry, these were added at the end of August, so end of August. Again, you can see we're really trying to follow the trends with the new models that we're adding to CounterSketch. So we've got one eternity band here, actually two of them, and both of these can be changed from an eternity to an anniversary if you don't want them to go all the way around the finger. Obviously, like with a lot of our models, you can change the stone shape and size on all of these to kind of update them, give them a different look. Both of these more engagement style rings, you can add diamonds down the shank, adjust all of the sizes, and add a matching wedding band as well. So these are really versatile models. We obviously added more than just these four to the collection, but these are the four that are trending right now that seem to be the most popular. And so I wanted to call them out on the webinar, make sure you guys were aware of them so that you can maybe spend a little time with them the next time you're working in CounterSketch and see if these might be good options for your customers in the future. Reminder, please join us on social media. So Gemvision Corp is on all of these different platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. We are trying to be present, and we really want to hear from our customers. So please join us on social media. You can do hashtag Gemvision for anything that you post, and we oftentimes will reshare your post. So don't hesitate to do that. We always love to see what you're creating using our software, and we want to share that with our followers as well. So definitely follow us, and like I said, hashtag Gemvision, and we will add those to our post. Finally, I mentioned at the top of the webinar that we will be recording, and I have recorded this webinar. I'm going to do some post-webinar editing this afternoon, and then I will update this recording early next week onto our website so that you can go in and check it out if there was anything that you wanted to review more closely, or you can have other members of your staff take a look if you think it would be beneficial to them. All you have to do to find the recording is go to www.stellar.com/webinars, find the appropriate webinar. In this case, it would be the September solution session, and click on Watch Now. We will be having a October solution session. Correct date for this solution session is October 8th, which is also a Thursday at 9 a.m. Central. We're going to be looking specifically at talking about freehand user parts. We're going to do some Pinterest to price examples. We'll probably switch back to rings next month. Just wanted to do a couple of necklaces this month to change it up a little. And then we'll also talk about the new library designs that were added in September. To sign up for this webinar, which again is going to be on October 8th at 9 a.m., you'll go to the same place you go to watch the videos, which is stellar.com/webinars. As always, if you have questions, you're welcome to hang out. I'll be happy to respond to those. Also, if you have ideas, like I said, for future models that you would like to see built out on Pinterest to price in the webinars, please don't hesitate to send those to us. CounterSketch@gemvision.com is a great way to reach out to us, share your feedback, as well as any requests that you may have for future webinar topics if you don't cover that in the survey that we just sent out. So again, we are right at the top of the hour, so thank you so much for your time this morning. Again, for those of you who were originally supposed to attend the September webinar earlier in the month and were able to reschedule and join us today, I appreciate your patience, and again apologize for the problems that we had earlier in the month. Thanks for hanging in there with us and joining the rescheduled webinar. We will have the recording out soon, and so you should have access to that early next week. Thank you again for your time this morning. I do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you on October 8th for our next solution session. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.